Know that we are recording this meeting, and Director Hamilton, when you're ready, will you kick us off?
I will. I'm very pleased to welcome everyone to join us in this public meeting tonight in an informal setting so that everyone will have a chance to participate. If you would kindly be sure to mute your mic if you're not speaking, that'll help reduce any background noise and be sure that we're all able to hear each other well. With that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Karen Thorne.
Thank you, Rachel. Matt, can you share the PowerPoint, please? So my name is Karen Thorne. I am one of the permitting supervisors here at the district. And I'm just going to run through a couple of things regarding the permit process tonight. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so quick agenda for this evening. I'm going to give a brief intro to the permitting process. As I said, Rachel Hamilton, our director, is going to give an introduction into HFC 23 reduction. Matt is then going to walk us through the Chemours permit application and permit, and then we'll have an open forum for public discussion. Next slide, please. So briefly want to explain the difference between a public meeting and a public hearing. We're at a public meeting currently. It's an informal open discussion. The public is allowed to ask questions and discuss the project with APCD staff. But during this meeting, there's no opportunity to provide official public comment, and this will not become a part of the official permit record. At a public hearing, however, it is a formal process with procedures set forth by regulation. It must be requested in writing. And during the public hearing, APCD would provide a description of the process and the permit. We would allow official comments to be made by the public, and then we would provide a written response at a later date. Next slide, please. So just briefly, public comments, because this permit is open. Currently, the public comment period is open for this permit. It closes on January 18th. So you can submit written comments. They will become part of the permit record, and we will respond to all comments in writing in our official response to comment document. Also, the regulated facility, Chemours in this case, will be given 10 days to respond to public comments, and then the district will take those responses into consideration as well. Next slide. Okay, just to quickly run through how you can make an official comment to the district. If you go to our proposed actions page on our website, you can click the red button that's at the top where it says submit a comment on a proposed action. You just have to click the bullet for permit and type in your comment. If you see in the chat, if you click chat at the bottom of your screen, you'll see Matt Mudd has put in a link to this proposed actions page where you can do this. Next slide, please. You can also email a comment to us if that's easier. You can email a comment to airpermits@louisvilleky.gov. And we are going to make this presentation available after this public meeting, so you can go back and look. But the email address is airpermits@louisvilleky.gov. And you're also welcome to mail or hand deliver comments to us at our office. Okay, Rachel?
I think you're on mute.
All right, so again, technology has just become everyone's friend. Want to be sure that folks are muted. Ms. Christensen may be in here a couple of times, so you may want to check if you've called in or you've connected via your phone. And I will try to mute myself when I'm done and remember to unmute myself when I'm ready. So, what are hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs? These are greenhouse gases that were intentionally developed as replacements for ozone-depleting substances, part of the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments. They're used primarily for refrigeration, air conditioning, aerosols, fire suppression, and foam blowing. They have global warming potentials, which is the measure of the relative climate impact of the greenhouse gas that can be hundreds to thousands of times greater than carbon dioxide. Because of current air conditioning use, HFC use is growing worldwide due to the phase out of these ozone-depleting substances and increasing use of refrigeration. Next slide, please, Matt. So here in Louisville, Chemours manufactures refrigerant gases at its Louisville works, including HCFC-22. HFC-23 is a product, is produced as a byproduct during the HCFC-22 production. Next slide, Matt. So what's the public health consequences of the HFC? As potent greenhouse gases, it's the climate warming potential of these HFCs that is of concern. They exacerbate climate change and may lead to extreme weather events and the corresponding public health threats, physical damage, and economic costs. HFCs, including HCFC-22 and HFC-23, are not regulated as hazardous air pollutants under the Clean Air Act or as toxic air contaminants under the district's Strategic Toxic Air Reduction Program. Next slide, please. So how did we get here tonight? Back in December of 2020, Congress passed the American Innovation in Manufacturing Act. It directed EPA to address hydrofluorocarbons by phasing down production and consumption by 85% over the next 15 years, maximizing the reclamation and minimizing releases from equipment, and facilitating the transition to next-generation technologies through sector-based restrictions. Next slide, please. In terms of regulatory rulemaking, the speed at which this rule has been proposed by US EPA and adopted is really remarkably swift. In May of 2021, EPA proposed, and then on September 24th, adopted the phase down of hydrofluorocarbons, establishing the allowance allocation and trading program under the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act rule. This rule sets HFC production and consumption baseline levels for reduction, establishes allocation and trading HFC allowances for 22 and 2023, proposes an enhanced compliance and enforcement system, and requires companies that emit HFC-23 to either capture and sell that HFC-23 for consumptive use as part of their allocation, or destroy the captured HFC-23 by incineration no later than October 1 of 2022. Next slide, please, Matt. So that brings you up to where we are from a regulatory standpoint. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Matt King, APCD's Manager of Industrial Permitting.
Thanks, Rachel. All right, so again, we have a permit out for public notice. It is not regulating these HFCs. That's being done at that federal level, but the facility is requesting to install some new equipment and to kind of replumb and connect that equipment, and that's the subject of the permit we've issued. We have on our proposed actions page a copy of that proposed draft permit, the draft statement of basis, the corresponding application, and the public notice, which went out in our email list and in the Courier Journal, documenting the timeframes and the process at hand. I want to get to your all's questions and comments, but just a little bit more about the project. So again, the project is designed to reduce significant amounts of these greenhouse gases. but it also affects what I'll refer to as traditional air pollutants, those hazardous air pollutants, VOCs, things like that. And so a couple terms we use, or a term we use, is potential emissions. And in a general sense, that's what would the plant emit if it were running at full capacity. And so on the left, I'm showing in blue the VOCs, both pre-project and post-project. So again, that's the maximum emissions if the plant was fully utilized all day, every day, and you'll see a slight decrease in those VOCs. So after the project, if they were to run this facility at maximum capacity, they would have less emissions than currently running at full capacity. And then you can see in the green those HAPs, those hazardous air pollutants. Again, the HFCs don't fall into either of these categories, but the same that happened with VOCs, that under the current operating scenarios, if it were run at full capacity, the facility would emit about 12 tons of HAPs. Post-project at full capacity, it would be down around 6 tons of HAPs. But again, that's potential. Most plants do not run at full capacity. So on the right, we have, with the same color coding, VOCs in blue, HAP emissions in green, and it shows the actual emissions that are a good bit below potential, which is common in the industrial sector. So again, this permit is specifically proposing to authorize the addition of a little bit or several items of new processing equipment, as well as kind of a repiping of things. But these charts represent the plant-wide aspects of the facility. So this, again, public notice and comment period, we run a standard 30-day, but we've extended this up until January the 18th, a week from today. We're in our meeting here tonight. If you can't find this stuff online, we have copies of the permit. You can call me, email me, pick one up at the office, and we will be accepting those written comments till midnight through the email and the link, and until 5 o'clock if you wanted to hand deliver that or mail it. Members of the public can also request a public hearing. That, again, is that more formal process. It's more of a chance for folks to orally make their statements and questions and comments, and then we don't respond in that hearing, and we provide a written response to those comments. I think we're going to open up to questions. I do want to hit one more time. This meeting is not official commenting. We're hoping it's beneficial to have that informal conversation. But if you think of a comment during the meeting, hit the link, email it to us shortly afterward or anytime in the next week. Mail it, email it, drop it off. And I really am glad to see so many folks on the meeting. And I think we'll be ready to open it up to questions and comments. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We can come back to it if there's specific questions. I hope, and I see a pretty full list of folks, but I hope folks are able to see who all's involved and make their comments. But like I said, we can pull this back up if it helps with any questions or comments. All right, and I think with that, and we do have quite a few people, so if we need to, we can assign some order. But I think I'll just open it up. And really, you know, we're learning with these public meetings. We want it to be an informal back and forth, but if it gets to where it's not helpful, we'll try to kind of readjust. So at this point, we're just opening it up and look forward to hearing what folks have to say. I think I see a physical hand raise from Sarah Lynn Cunningham. And I think if you want to kick us off, go for it.
Thank you. I forgot about the digital hand. I'm not even sure where it is. But
That worked just fine the way you did it.
thank you. I have summarized, I should say I am Sarah Lynn Cunningham. I'm an environmental engineer and a co-founder and the executive director of the Louisville Climate Action Network. We currently consist of 48 organizations, 26 other nonprofits, 11 for-profit businesses, 7 congregations and religious groups, and 4 educational institutions, plus 1,000 or so and change individuals. And we are very committed to cutting carbon pollution through voluntary efforts and better public policies. And we consider APCD's work as affecting public policy. I don't like to read to audiences, but I'm effectively probably going to do so, and my comments are only 1 page long, so it probably won't be too painful. The summary of our thinking about this proposed action is, because we see the elimination of Chemours' superpotent HFC 23 greenhouse gas emissions as long overdue, we support achieving that goal as soon as possible. However, we also have serious concerns that we believe must be addressed. Even once Chemours is permitted to make plant modifications needed to capture its greenhouse gases per the federal deadline, we believe it should not be regulated as an area source unless and until it verifies its eligibility for reduced accountability responsibilities. I have lab work in the morning. I got to keep drinking water. The basis of our concern: Chemours, albeit then entitled DuPont, broke its 2015 promise to the Obama administration to eliminate its HFC 23 emissions by 2018. DuPont has had a long history of polluting Louisville and West Virginia. Plant managers can be reassigned elsewhere and their verbal commitments vaporized. To ensure that we completed our review within the comment period despite the year-end holidays, LCAN hired extra technical expertise to assist us with reviewing Chemours' application and the draft permit, which we saw the number for it and all that. And we have provided both Air Pollution Control District and Chemours a copy of his draft report, and maybe not before the night's up, but certainly by tomorrow, I'll have his report posted on our website so that anybody else can see it. Based upon his research and his feedback to us and our own perspective, we have multiple concerns, but the overriding 3 are these. Number 1 is transparency. We believe that transparency is the basis of accountability, and that together they are a key foundation to democratic societies. We could not check numerous assertions in Chemours' application due to undefined, unattributed, and/or unreliable assumptions used in its calculations and models. We don't know of a good reason for that lack of transparency. We hope we're wrong on this account, but we couldn't find any way to see it any other way other than something doesn't add up. Number 2, verification. We believe that verification should be encoded into the amended permit to show 2 things. Number 1, whether the process modifications necessary to collect and separate Chemours' flue gases, including the HFC 23 greenhouse gas, the volatile organic carbon compound, which is chloroform, and 3 hazardous air pollutants. We want to know, does it really justify treating the facility as an area source? And secondly, does it really show that the project lowers the health burdens that Chemours places on our community? The permit should require Chemours to do more, whatever it takes, The permit should be amended to require Chemours to fix anything that the verification shows really wasn't what everybody expected. And then lastly, and noting that this is beyond APCD's jurisdiction, but it is something that Chemours can help to clarify, We seek verification that Louisville's greenhouse gas problem doesn't become West Virginia's air toxics program. Therefore, we ask Chemours and APCD to review our consultants' reports and our concerns and the one-page summary that I transmitted earlier this afternoon as applicable, meaning we don't expect APCD to respond to the verification of what's going on in Virginia, but we're hoping Chemours will. And that we hope that those responses include transparency and verification requirements so that we can get this important work done. So that's my thoughts, and I don't know if it's appropriate to respond to them now or later, but that's the summary of what we have to say, and we presume to submit formal final comments before the 18th. And we haven't done so already simply because we're hoping that we learn more this evening that would allow us to refine them better.
Carolyn, this is Rachel, and thank you so much for that summary. That's a very nice statement of your concerns, and I would ask that you submit that as a formal comment so that we can provide you with that fulsome answer as part of the record.
Okay, will do. Do you want that, like, do you want it now or do you want it before the 18th with more refinement based upon today, or whichever?
Whatever's most convenient for you. So we appreciate
I already submitted what I read you.
Good. Thank you for that.
And I think I'll just add briefly the removal of the once in, always in policy, which I'll try not to speak so jargony, but previously, once you were a major source for HAPs, you were always a major source for HAPs. Those rules did change, and we will observe those rules that when you lower those emissions, you can step out of that major source status, but don't have specific answers for you, but in a general sense, this agency has really thought about that doesn't mean the elements of those major source rules entirely go away. We are going to look for our other authorities and make sure that we're not stopping anything that has been very beneficial just because of that status change. Again, we'll give you a little more in writing, and you know, the devil's in the details, and words are cheap, but a lot of us share that concern, and I think there's some ways to not immediately revert to the bare bones area source rules.
Thank you.
We do hope to have some conversation, but I don't want just APCD to overtake. So if anyone else would like to go, I'm not seeing, but I'll take help from some of our APCDers. I'm not seeing any raised hands.
It has a raised hand.
I'm horrible. Thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
Tom,
Tom
if you're able to go,
Fitzgerald?
do you need to be unmuted?
Oh, that's okay. Margaret, you go ahead.
You're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I just have a general question, and it certainly isn't as specific, but I wondered what APCD already knows in terms of the processes. You know, what will happen in inserting new technology to deal with HFC 23? What in general can one expect in terms of effects on the HAPs emissions? Is anything in general known? Or
I will take a quick stab at that, and I hope some others might jump in. But we had discussed the concept that we call potential. So if you're running that plant at full capacity, not realistic, but it's a tool we use as regulators, that the proposed project would lower that potential. So if all other things are equal, we would expect lower emissions after the project. But you know, that's production dependent. If you saw, those actuals have been well below that potential. So the district is not able to confirm the exact change that might happen to emissions. As we get emissions data, that real world data, we would make that available. But the design should reduce emissions at that scenario where both worlds are operating at capacity.
Yeah, I just meant relative to one another.
Yes, yes.
In terms of would HAPS go, I mean, maybe overall it'll go down, but relative to dealing, with reducing HFC 23, would HAPS relative to that go up or down?
The tightening of the ship to say that we'll capture more of the HFC 23 will also tighten those other pollutants.
Corinne also has her hand up,
Okay.
maybe to answer that.
Yeah, unless, I was just raising my hand to speak. I know Fitz had his hand up first. Fitz, you want to?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just have a few quick slides I want to share as I'm speaking. So,
You'll see a share button there at the, you got it. I'm not helping anybody.
screen now. Okay, so there are 4 of us representing Chemours on this call tonight. We want to thank everybody for this opportunity. I'm the new site environmental lead here. Julie Johnson is our plant manager. She's on the call. Sean Ewell is our manufacturing technology director for the whole business line. He's on the call. And Jim McDonald from AECOM is our principal air permitting consultant. He's on the call as well. Ooh, one at a time. Okay, so the primary concern we have coming into this meeting is when the permit got posted for public review, there was a lot of misinterpretation, presuming that because the emissions that got posted in the statement of basis were the VOCs and the HAPs, those are the regulated pollutants, they were misinterpreted as being increases or new emissions, when in fact they're just the resulting emissions that remain after the project. I want to be absolutely clear that this project will not cause any increases in any potential emit of any pollutant. The whole purpose of the project is to reduce the HFC 23 greenhouse gas by upwards of 99%, but it will also have the co-benefit of reducing the VOC potential emissions and the hazardous air pollutant potential emissions. Like Matt was saying, it's going to tighten the ship. There's nothing from the equipment that needs to be installed to allow this to happen that will create any new air pollutants. We are not expanding any process capacity. We're not expanding throughput. There's not going to be any debottlenecking. We're just taking out some existing equipment and replacing it with tighter equipment that's going to allow us to capture the HFC 23. And it's going to also have the co-benefit of reducing some of those VOC and HAP emissions. This is our money slide here. Here at the bottom, we've included the excerpt from the statement of basis. And these are the 2 numbers that got reported. What these numbers represent, these would be the end project or the post-project potential to emit regulated volatile organic compounds, regulated hazardous air pollutants from the equipment that would be installed, the new and modified equipment. What this compares to, the table at the top, I just do some of our emission numbers into a quick spreadsheet. As currently configured, as the plant is operating right now, constructed right now, the VOC and HAP emissions from this same emission unit are 1.13 tons, potential tons per year, volatile organic compounds, and 1.6 potential ton per year hazardous air pollutants. After the project, after we take out some existing equipment and put in this new and modified equipment, the potential, all that we could possibly do with this existing process line is 0.3 tons per year of volatile organic compounds and just almost 0.8 tons per year of hazardous air pollutants. Just looking at the equipment that we're going to take out and replace with the new and modified equipment, we're looking at a 73% reduction in VOC potential and a 51% reduction in hazardous air pollutant potential, along with the greater than 99% reduction in these HFC 23 greenhouse gas emissions. So I just want to make it, I appreciated Matt's slide deck at the front. I think he did a good job. This is just another way of looking at that. And I wanted to make sure everybody sees this up here. I do have a couple of other slides to respond to the question that Sarah Lynn just raised about the destination facility. So we are Chemours Louisville Works. At this facility, our product is making the F22, and as a byproduct, we make the HFC 23. Because of the AIM Act, we'll no longer be able to sell or emit the HFC 23. So if the AIM Act compels that to be destroyed somewhere. We have a sister site in Washington, West Virginia. That facility already has a thermal oxidizer, a destruction facility to destroy HFC 23. We are already sending some of our HFC 23 to the Washington Works facility. The sister facility of ours has the constructed, paid for, built up and operating thermal oxidizer that has the capacity, the existing capacity, as already permitted, to take all the HFC 23 that we would generate here and incorporate it in. It's already permitted. It already meets all the West Virginia emission standards. And as an added bonus, that location in Washington, West Virginia is in an ozone attainment area. Whereas at one point several years ago, there had been some consideration, would it be even desirable to build such a facility here, where of course we're in an ozone non-attainment area, and any additional source like that would not be good. But the fact is, it's already there, it's already built, they already have the capacity, and it's already been vetted through the permitting process. I have these other slides here anticipating this question. The facility has been inspected 6 times in the past 5 years. Washington Works, this is. There have been no identified violations. This slide here shows their compliance monitoring history over the past 5 years. This is all from EnviroFacts. This is all on the US EPA website. This is stack testing data from our sister facility. They showed this with us, and their destruction efficiencies. They do annual testing for the HFC 23, and they do triennial testing for other pollutants, and we call this 5 nines. They're testing up to 99.998% efficiency. They're only required to hit 99.99. This is from a couple years ago when they were testing that expanded list of pollutants, and they were hitting 99, 99, 99.6 as a destruction removal efficiency. So I just wanted to put that up there and share that, and thank the district for this opportunity, and thank everybody else for your interest in supporting this project.
Corinne, can you share that with us so we can study it at a larger scale? Because maybe it's my middle-aged eyes, but I couldn't read all of that.
I don't know. I've got it up here. I don't know. But
Maybe
yeah.
ask the boss.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have a couple other hands up. It looks like Byron B. Do you want to take one, Byron?
Yeah, I was just going to ask what the estimation of the 99% decrease in HFC, what information was that based on?
And Corinne may need to jump in. You know, the APCD is not going to have a role in that exactly, so I don't want to misspeak, but I believe that's what's being required in that federal regulation. And, you know, part of that is capturing it, and then that high destruction efficiency you saw at the plant in West Virginia would, I believe, have to overall meet that 99. But Corinne, if you know different, or if anyone else knows different, please speak up.
I understand that. I was asking specifically what, how the change in equipment is going to ensure that, and what that is based on.
I was going to defer to Sean Wool. Sean, can you take that?
Are you asking about the equipment at the Washington Works facility or the new equipment at the Louisville Works facility?
How the new equipment will ensure that.
So
At
I think,
Louisville.
yeah, I think at least start with the Louisville and if you.
Yes, I'm asking about how the new equipment
Yeah.
in Louisville will
Yeah,
ensure that.
Corinne mentioned that the plant today recovers some of the F-23 that's produced. In fact, more than half of what's produced today is a byproduct of the F-22 process. So the new equipment enhances that process to increase it from greater than 50% to greater than 99% ability to capture the F-23, and then it would be transported for thermal destruction.
Say that again, please, Sean.
The new equipment that's being installed and enhances the equipment that we have today, that we are already capturing a portion of the F-23 that's produced and is today being transported offsite for destruction. The new equipment enhances the ability to capture and increases it from greater than 50% to greater than 99%.
So to me, the operative question is, are y'all willing to agree to verify that over, say, the next 2 years?
It will be required, I think, to continue measuring F-23 production and then also what is captured and then ultimately destroyed.
Is that so, Matt?
Well, I want to again be clear that it's a federal regulation. That doesn't mean everything will work out perfectly, but I want to be clear. APCD will certainly, if we are aware of something, we would reach out to the EPA, but we're not in a role to verify that or to enforce that. And I'm not sure if Byron's question, but it may have been also more a little about how that actual collection will work. And if that's not of interest, we don't need to go down that path. But, you know, my statement is that is not part of this permit or APCD's role with this project.
Yeah, I was, I guess, specifically asking how it is captured and how can that information be verified, the efficiency of it. And I know that APCD may not have the reach to regulate on it, but would Chemours be willing to provide that information for the public and the community around?
That information will be reported to US EPA as a requirement of the AIM Act, and it's all going to go in one of those federal databases that's all, you know, available.
Fitz had his hand up next.
Thank you. First of all, hi. I want to tell the district I very much appreciate you doing another public meeting. I think this is much more informative and than the formal stilted public comment periods, although we know we have to do that for, you know, to build the record. But I appreciate the dialogue. Corinne, I appreciate very much your presentation because you answered a couple of my questions. The reportage had, in fact, or at least I interpreted the reportage as suggesting that while there were significant, and I think everyone appreciates the reductions of a very potent greenhouse gas, the suggestion was that the offset of that was that there would be a net increase in localized emissions, and of course that is an environmental justice concern that affects all of us, not only the facility but the folks who live on the other side of the fence as well as the district. So I was pleased that in terms of the PTE, or the potential to admit, that you're seeing it looked like a 51 and 73% reduction in the VOCs and then in the HAPs. I guess just to follow up on that, and I really would appreciate following up on Sarah Lynn's question, if we could get the slides that you presented tonight, if you could like send a copy of those to Matt and he could post them or send them to us, because and I'll tell you why in just a second, but under normal operating conditions, would we see that same reduction in those HAPs and VOCs? Is I guess my follow-up question, because, you know, PTE is one thing. Nobody actually produces or operates in that world. But we project the worst, right? What is the uncontrolled PTE? What is the, what limits are you taking? Those sorts of things. But in terms of normal operating conditions, we're not going to see a spike in any of the HAPs or the VOCs, are we?
No, we should not see an increase in any of them because it's the capture equipment that's pulling it down. The VOC reduction is only so much. What's
Right.
a really good news story here is that while we're capturing the HFC 23 where we are in the process, that's also knocking down the concentration of HCl in a gas stream that is going to the next emission unit. And because it's a lower concentration going to that unit, we're seeing significant or projecting significant reductions there because there's less going to it. So actual emissions should reduce at the same expected rate that potential emissions would reduce.
Okay, that's excellent. Well, that was just my follow-up on that. And in terms of West Virginia, all of us, including, I'm sure, you and the rest of the management team here in Louisville, don't like to take our problem and ship it somewhere else. Although, particularly since everybody in this area is sensitive to that because they have been the ones that have had everybody else's problems shipped to them over the years. So it's helpful to look at the actual numbers from the stack tests and such over in West Virginia. I was pleased to see we're looking at 6 nines plus. And I did notice in passing, I think that the West Virginia facility is considered a TSDF under the hazardous waste standard. So it does have a pretty rigorous set of reduction, and capture efficiency in terms of the thermal unit there. But I just wanted to, if we could look at that at some point, that would be very helpful. And I realize that is well beyond what you have to present as part of this application process, but it saves us a FOIA request over to West Virginia, and it would be very helpful. And then the last thing is Byron had asked, and you had responded that the data on your monitoring that you're going to be doing, the testing that you're going to be doing is all required to be reported. It would be helpful if you don't already have one, you might, to have a local page on your website so that a neighbor, myself, Byron, somebody who's interested in what's going on can look at and say, here are the current permits that we have. Here are, information, here's testing, here's whatever in one place that you can access in Louisville without going on Echo, without going on all these other web bases, kind of similar to what the power plants are now having to do with their compliance with the CCR, with the coal combustion residuals. They're having to do a web page, and so I think it'd be real helpful to do that because it also encourages direct communication. I love the fact that we are talking as opposed to relying on Rachel and Matt to mediate our conversation. And I know that whenever that happens, it's a good thing, right? There may be some tension sometimes, but I think it's always a good thing that the neighbors are talking to their industrial neighbor as opposed to asking somebody else to mediate it. So I just want to express my appreciation. And Matt, Rachel, thank you. And Sarah Lynn, I want to thank you and your engineer for taking the time to kind of, to give some feedback on it. I was pleased to hear Matt say that the shift, and of course, it's not a shift from being a stationary source for traditional emissions. We're talking about area source just for the HAPs under the STAR program or under the federal HAP program. But the idea that there is kind of a gradual off ramp, I think, it's the old Reagan thing of trust but verify. I think we were all pleased to see Chemours having access to the capital to put the new equipment in place to capture the emissions. And I know it's always a fight when you're an environmental engineer fighting with somebody else over the access to capital to put pollution control equipment on as opposed to doing an expansion. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Fitz.
All right, I see
Ebony? Yeah.
Ebony Neal Cochran has her hand up if you want to go.
Yeah, I hope this doesn't sound like a whole bunch of rambling. I'm not feeling so well today, but so I'm not an engineer, and of course I've lost my notes. I had tons of questions, but it seemed strange to me. It seems like everything that's being said in this permit application is something that we have to take the word of Chemours for. And I'm wondering if that's a normal thing to not have to demonstrate either pre or post, well, really pre approval of the permit. Like, so it's almost like, you know, Chemours gets to submit their application. This is what they say. There was even one point in there, it was either, I can't remember which document it was. They refer to a designer of a piece of equipment, a David somebody, who says that the equipment has 100% efficiency. It's just like, where was that demonstrated? Has that been demonstrated? How does APCD go about being informed enough to even make the decision to say, yes, we approve this, if we're only going by the word of Chemours versus demonstration? So I hope that there was a question in there.
Sure. And we can come back to you too, but I will add, first, I think, there is an element of self-policing in these types of permits. But I want to point out that the permit is really the starting phase, that we also do unannounced on-site inspections. We oftentimes require testing, which I've heard is a concern here, that we certainly want to consider some of that. The permits are reviewed by our staff. For that 100%, I will agree. That's really not something we ever accepted. But it was in their application, and maybe we should have responded back and noted that in our review that it wasn't quite right. But we have actually been using a lower number than that. But your point is well taken, and I think that we need to take a good look and make sure we're requiring that follow-up and that verification. But I think occasionally the permit can seem like the only aspect of the regulation of these sources. So I want to note that we have a really good compliance team that reviews all those test results, those compliance reports, goes out and does those inspections. But your point about trusting, there is some elements of that. The risk of misleading is pretty strong, but and this is kind of a bad comparison, but we have a local meat processor who has multiple USDA inspectors on site whenever they're running. And this is a little different. And I think that's something that the profession needs to think about. But I want to assure you that none of their statements are blindly accepted. Again, that 100% efficiency was really an absurdity that we did not process and consider accurate, but we did not document that in anything that was made available to the public. So some good points, things we really do need to think about, but there is more to this regulation, this regulating process than simply looking at application, giving a permit, and assuming they're in compliance from there on out. There's a lot of follow-up. Do you have any other thoughts or questions, or do we want to move on and we can come back? I see your hand is up. I don't know if you haven't unraised it. Do you have any other thoughts, Ebony?
Actually, I haven't put it down, but
Okay.
I think, let me see, what was that? You know what? Let me see if I can.
Okay, I understand. There's a lot to this stuff. I see Tina Halbig has her hand up. You'd like to go? I think you're muted.
Sorry for that. Tina Halbig with the United Nations Association of Kentucky and also Floyd's Fork Environmental Association. I first read about the thermal oxidizer, I believe that DuPont was using in North Carolina or installing. I was very impressed that it was guaranteed to remove 99.99% of PFAS. And so I'm very hopeful that you will get very good results. Do you know also, do you have PFAS at the Chemours plant?
We do not have PFAS at the Chemours plant. We make the
Only the-
HCFC 22 that goes to Washington Works, and then it goes to other facilities, and then the fluoro products are developed downstream from us.
But no fluoropolymers.
Correct. At other facilities, we just make the HCFC 22, and that is the feedstock product, and that goes. It is not.
The technology looks very good.
Thank you.
Rachel Hamilton, I think you have your hand up, or is that okay? No problem. Tell you, I'm really impressed at the turnout, and I hope the folks are learning some stuff. I don't see any hands up, but APCDers, let me know. I think Ebony's just popped up again, but we're going to stay on the line. You know, we're not going to make folks keep a continuous comment to stay open. But Ebony, if you'd like to go.
Yeah. So again, I'm no engineer, but have asked questions of other folks. And I believe there is a factor that you all put in the permit, AP42, if I'm not mistaken. I hope I'm not mistaken. I don't like misspeaking.
No, that is the emission factor library that EPA has. I don't believe it's in this exact permit, but it's used at this facility, and some of their application covered other components than what's in this permit.
Okay.
It's definitely in the application.
Yes, yeah, AP42 is used.
Several of them are.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Because it seems like, you know what? I'm not even going to bring. I'll put it in the comments because I want to know what I'm talking about before I say it. But yeah,
Okay.
AP42 factor is kind of strange because, yeah, never mind. Sorry, y'all.
Just to provide a little info, and I'm not trying to speak for you, but last year EPA put out what they call a bulletin, which I haven't seen many of, kind of a warning, and it notes that AP42 are some pretty rough estimates. I will say that over my 20 years, EPA has specifically trained me on how to use AP42 for plant-specific emissions, but they are not the most accurate. And so we certainly have to make estimates at times, but when it's important, we need to do more direct measurement, have more of a closer look. So what I believe AP42 was used for in their application, and I'll admit the district does use it for our emission inventories, was for their natural gas boilers. So those do emit, and pollution's never good, but we're still at the district in a process of deciding where it is best to get that extra data. And I will admit that natural gas boilers are not at the top of that list. So we're processing that bulletin, certainly with more complex processes with a little more potential for bad emissions. We shouldn't be using AP42. So that's more of a summary than any kind of final determination. And that's something that, I think we all knew AP42 were rough estimates, but it was some of our better estimates when we have, hundreds of processes around. So the shoe's got to fit. We got to find the right spot. How, our power plants have continuous monitoring systems in the stacks. And I think certainly that's a fair requirement when you're talking about thousands of tons of emissions. And that's been an ongoing process to decide, even before that bulletin, where is a rough EPA estimate good enough? Where is a higher order design estimate good enough? And where do we need testing? So those are really important issues and things we need to continue to think about.
I don't understand how to hold up my hand digitally.
I think if you look at the bottom, there's no, that.
You go to the participants list there, Lynn, and then hover over your name.
Oh.
It will pull up a teeny little icon.
It's the little smiley face.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't look like a hand. Yeah, see that work? Cool. So may I follow up on your point? To me, this is just a good example of where we need to do local verification. In the solid waste business many years ago, the EPA published a study done by a consultant that said the typical US city, if you go through all of their trash that they put in the landfill, 25% is yard waste and 15% is paper. And they just kept breaking it down. And you know, a lot of time has passed and things have changed, and yet lots of people want to keep still using these design factors, and we just have to say no. And instead, now what we do is we take dumpsters and we dump them out on the ground and we separate it into lots of piles and weigh it so that it really reflects Louisville. And I just think that I want to clarify that Elkan's point is in this particular situation, we think it's appropriate to do ground truthing. I do not know if that means continuous emissions testing, quarterly, or something in between. But I will say, having spent a lot of my career dealing with wastewater where we have to test every day, multiple parameters and other parameters weekly and other parameters monthly and other parameters quarterly, it just seems to me like we should be requiring something that will give the public comfort that our needs are being met.
I think that's a good point, and I think that's something that we've seen really over the years. Certainly, this bulletin changes things or puts a little more emphasis on that. Um, you know, especially in the start of this, 60s and 70s era environmental movement, there had to be estimates, and certainly there's still a time to make some estimates, but we're evaluating that bulletin. We're looking at each renewal, each construction permit, at what the best way to get that information is. And I am fairly hopeful, and I'm not a super positive person, but that the low-cost sensors, the improvements to technology might put some of us engineers out of work. If you can simply put a pretty low-cost device in a stack and know what's coming out, it would be great for the environment, great for air quality, and bad for some of us. But I hope to put myself out of work for a number of reasons.
Me too.
But that is a really important issue. I think that's something that we do need to think about for all permits, but this permit as well. And in some cases, especially with a newly proposed project, you might take an application with an AP42 factor. And really, when we write a permit, we're saying it looks like you're set up to comply, but it's not saying stamp of approval, you're in full compliance forever. That's where you may issue a permit on AP42, follow up with stack testing to see what's really there and deal with the outcomes of that test. I will note, and this I can't guarantee on every process, but a lot of testing shows that AP42 was a little high in its estimates, but I'm sure there's examples where it's low. So a serious thing, certainly need to evaluate and look to EPA and other states and locals for where are they finding meaningful, more direct data measure or emission measurements, and see if we can't, learn from the bigger group. I think I see Corinne has her hand up again.
I just want to jump in real quick on this question of the AP42 and the emission factors. There is not a chapter in the AP42 library on emission factors from producing Freon 22. That chapter doesn't exist. So to that point, because we have a very complex chemical process, we've had to do the calculations using the equipment we have on site, using the throughputs, using the concentrations, and we've developed the emission factors that have been in each permit application that the facility has shared with the district, and we've reviewed that math and the calculations and said this is where this comes from, and that's all been vetted through the district. With our powerhouse, we have inline continuous emission monitoring system for the nitrogen oxides and the carbon monoxide. So for those big criteria pollutants, we are doing direct monitoring, and all that gets rolled up in our quarterly reports to the district under the NOx rack plan. We're only using the AP42 for those very speciated emission factors where it's literally thousandths or tens of thousands of a pound per million BTU. That's where we're using the AP42 because natural gas is natural gas, and like Matt said, they're usually err on the side of over exaggeration, but the numbers are so small to begin with.
But how many millions of BTUs do you burn?
We know what the gas throughput at the powerhouse is.
Yeah. What I'm trying to say though is even if the constituent elements of that gas are very, 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 very small, if you're burning a very, very large quantity, it still results in a large mass. And so
doesn't result in large mass. It results in a very small number. I don't have that spreadsheet in front of me, but you know that's all in our mission inventory statement.
Well, call me an academic, but I would love to see footnotes or endnotes that source and qualify all this stuff because it just helps the reader to understand and develop trust and focus on what's unfinished.
Right now, our focus is getting this equipment in so that we can capture these greenhouse gases and achieve that upwards of 99%. And to the point where the question was raised, we know we're going to get well over 99% capture. We're predicting 99 point something really nice. And we dialogue every single month with our Rubbertown Community Advisory Council, and I am absolutely certain that we'll be pleased to report what those actual emission capture rates are, because we know it's going to be good, and we're looking forward to doing that.
And thank you. For those of you who aren't aware, the Rubbertown Community Advisory Council meets each month, and that may be a place where sharing that information is a great place to provide that, and then follow up with an easily accessible report for non-members.
I believe Ebony has her hand up.
So I just want to remind everyone in this meeting that when I'm a person who lives in one of the areas that's impacted by environmental injustice. And so when we hear people saying, oh, it's just going to be a minuscule amount, or it's just going to be a small amount, it's very important for you all to take into consideration cumulative impacts and how when you say it's just a little, your little bit is adding to the little bit of all of these industries who are emitting hazardous chemicals that are affecting actual human beings. So I just want to just remind people of that. Little bit is very relative, and so your little bit is adding on, and it's not good. It's a bad amount, whatever you're putting out there. So that's why it's important that when it comes to talking about the efficiency of equipment, when it comes to maintenance of equipment, there have been plenty of people, and this is not really Chemours specific, but if to me, if a permit doesn't have some post testing, a certain frequency of testing after the project is done, then that doesn't mean much to me. So that's just a reminder. We got to remember cumulative impacts and remember that actual human beings are being affected by these things.
Good points. Good points. So I see Wallace has his hand up.
I will join in saying I applaud APCD for holding this meeting. It certainly has been highly informative, and by golly, it reminds me of how complicated trying to regulate a large industrial facility is. And boy, it's been a while since I've studied AP42. What I draw from the discussion is that the potential to pollute is going to go down from this permit. The actual emissions will go down some. That's good, but there still will be hazardous air pollutants. There still will be volatile organic compounds emitted. There still will be some greenhouse gas emissions, highly potent hydrofluorocarbons. So I would like to suggest to Chemours that maybe it would be good if they tried to offset that by being doing some outreach as a good neighbor to the community. Perhaps sharing their expertise with the local science classes in the schools, or I don't know, having a science fair annually with some prizes for local school students. Just something like that, I think, might help us feel a little bit better about what otherwise is admittedly a large industrial facility with some negative impacts for the community. So I thank you for hearing my suggestion.
Can I say real, I love this question and I can't believe he asked this just today. We got approval from corporate, approval for Chemours to donate a 5-year renewable grant to the Louisville Regional Science and Engineering Fair at $4,000 a year. So that's $20,000 a year over 5 years to the science fair. I'm on the board of the science fair, and we have a local committee that's the ChemFest partnership, where we're selecting a middle school to help them develop their science programs, their STEM programs, and mentor middle schoolers, because that's just where this is all going. And I know Julie wants to speak to this too.
Hi, I'm Julie Johnson. I'm the plant manager here at the Louisville facility. Part of our corporate responsibility commitments is not just around capturing emissions. It's really advancing STEM in the community. We really announced a program called Futures of Chemistry Scholars, and we're working on developing what that program is going to be looking like. And one of our other colleagues has actively been working for the past year on what we're calling ChemFest. It'll be partnering with a local school and advancing that. So you're absolutely right. We want to be partners with the local Louisville community. We want to advance the programs. I know I've spoken with several folks trying to build those commitments out. Whether it be in mentorship, we've worked with Cane Run. I know that's a popular school here in the area, but also looking at other school systems here and the local colleges, starting that relationship, to really make a difference in advancing STEM education across the community.
Sarah Lynn, I think you have your hand up.
Ebony's last question inspired an idea. In the world of wastewater treatment, we have something called waste load allocation and something called TMDL, which, if I recall correctly, stands for total mass daily load. And what we do is we look at all of the dischargers on a particular stream, the quantity that they are discharging to the stream, the quality or lack thereof of what they're discharging, and we compare the sum total and the spacing of those discharges on the stream against what we call a water quality standard. And if we can't achieve the water quality standard by giving everybody the waste load allocation that they want, we have to start cutting everybody back on a proportional basis so that we can maintain a healthy stream. And I'm wondering, and I ought to know the answer to this, but I'm not confident that I do, so I'm going to ask, is there anything analogous to that system for air pollution here in Louisville? Is it simply the STAR program, or do we have anything else that I'm forgetting about?
Well, and I don't want to, not exactly the same, but the classic example is the NAC standards. So we have a lot of rules that tell the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. We have a lot of rules that tell plants, if you run this kind of process, you have to meet these limits. And but there's also that overriding, what's the maximum that can be in the ambient air? And it's probably a little slower than the process you're talking about. But when we discover through monitoring that we're over those levels, then it doesn't matter if you're complying with your permit. We have to look for more things to do to bring that back down. With toxics, it's not quite the same. But we look at cumulative impacts from a plant. So it's not just 1 in a million per chemical per process. There are also cumulative goals. But I think that looking at those, first other regulated sources nearby, but also those area sources, those lesser regulated sources. And I don't want to tell you I have a plan for this or have some quick answer, but you're hearing a lot in the profession and a lot from the public about cumulative impacts. And I think we've got to get there sooner rather than later. But I think it also, for a lot of folks, is including, not just air or environmental impacts. What else is in a community and really outside of my lane, but for the folks that work at these chemical plants who are also exposed, I will say a lot of regulators don't live in the more polluted areas or near the industrial facilities, but a lot of the plant workers are there 8+ hours a day, and they rarely have the same concerns that a neighbor might have. But it's the same facility. I think if you're making your living off a plant, if you know a little, if it's not as mysterious, there's a lot of things at play than just each chemical and each limit. But we don't have a good answer for that cumulative impacts. I know the Greater We is working on that. You hear that a lot. I don't want to overstate that we do have that or tell you that's all been covered, but that is on the radar. That is something that we need to get to and make that, even Wallace's point of science fairs and things that, we all get some good and some bad from these products and industrial processes, but not fairly. And it's not spread out that fairly. And that's something that traditionally we haven't had a tool for.
Right.
Rachel, did you have something?
I do, and Sherilyn, you raised a really good point. For us, as Matt said, those national ambient air quality standards are what we use as our continuous improvement process of the Clean Air Act to strengthen those standards based on the best protective health science at the time. EPA is required to review those every 5 years. We go through a planning process, and then we make reductions to bring our area into attainment with those standards. The multi-pollutant stakeholder group work that has recently concluded for the 2015 ozone standard has completed a report that's on our website. I'm hoping that Matt Mudd may be able to drop a link to that work in our chat box. But while we were looking at ozone, we were also looking to see not only how we could reduce that, but what other actions might also reduce, for example, particulate matter or air toxics, and really looking at a multi-pollutant strategy. We think that's something that's on our horizon. That would be a new regulatory approach, and I hope that we'll be working towards that in the very near future and actually coming out and working with the public on what that would look like. So to Matt's other point, there are these regulatory programs that we put into place. Those include our prevention of significant deterioration and new source review programs that help us look at new development. One other place that, coming back to those kind of cumulative impacts that might be outside of APCD's actual regulatory jurisdiction, the Land Development Code is currently going through an equity review and focusing on those environmental justice issues that arise because where things are situated within our community, and looking at that Land Development Code to see what revisions are needed there to mitigate and hopefully help avoid future issues. But really, what strategies could we employ, not just with APCD, but community-wide, to mitigate decisions that have been made in the past? So with that, I see Byron Barber's hand is up, and I'll turn it over to him.
Sorry. All right, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was just going to speak to the point about what the statement Chemours made about public relations, and I guess it kind of ties into equity. But when it comes to strategizing how you increase the balance and how you negatively impacting communities, I think greater transparency and access to information so communities can advocate for themselves goes a lot further than just doing things like science fairs and things like that. Because I think materially, an organization like Chemours would benefit more from the PR of doing those types of events than what actually materializes in the community from having access to what is perceived to give communities more access to STEM. So I would just challenge everybody, including the district, to consider. I think it's much more valuable for community to have access to what's happening to them in a very accessible way, as opposed to, you know, pouring into things that are supposed to give communities more access to STEM, but we don't really have a quantifiable number on how that translates. So, yeah, just one more point. In terms of equity, you should always be thinking about how does this benefit community in a way that doesn't benefit me more if you're already in an empowered position, because otherwise equity just becomes a replacement for diversity or inclusion, and it should mean more than that.
All right, I think Corinne's hand's up. I think you're muted.
There we go. I thought I did that. I just want to thank Byron real quick and say, you know, and that's why we're anxious to get started on this project, because the way we see it, this project is a win-win-win. It's going to reduce those HFC 23 emissions by a heck of a lot, and it's also going to reduce the VOCs, and it's also going to reduce the HAPs. So we're glad to be part of this.
And I will note, it's very challenging to make this information available, you know, even as a government person where we're required to, and most of us want to. It's really complicated stuff. So we appreciate that kind of input, and probably could use some advice on good ways to have that information more readily available for folks. I think I'm seeing some hands up, but they were relics. I'm not sure. If you want to start talking, I think everybody's been so well behaved. I appreciate that. So if anybody has something to add, please do. We're not going to jump off immediately, but I think we're kind of, you know, hitting towards the end. And I do want to make a couple more statements about how to get those official comments in and how to know the deadlines and things. Sarah Lynn, do you have some more?
That's what I was going to essentially say, is I think it probably would be good to remind us of the next steps so that we're refreshed on how we're supposed to do things.
Okay, and I'm not trying to rush anybody, so does anybody have some more conversation to have before we run through some of those procedural aspects? All right, I'm going to try to share my screen just so you all can see it, but you know, Louisville APCD, Google that, and you can get some of this information. And 5746,000 is a pretty good way to ask for some instruction and advice. But let me get to the right slide. I'm going to bring it up one more time. Maybe. I'm not the best at this stuff, but it should be coming up here in just a second. So hopefully you're seeing a slide about how can I make an official comment. So I think the first thing to say is we've got one more week. So next Tuesday, the 18th, we will close the comment period. One easy way is to go to the APCD proposed actions page. There's a red link at the top. You will hit that. It will ask you, are you trying to do something about a permit or regulation? There's a box to type in the permit number that I think we've corrected to say or company name. Sometimes we have multiple permits out, so it helps us to know that. But I know, you know, trying to find the permit number and stuff can be a hassle. So if you just type a company name, if you type greenhouse gas, we'll try to make it as easy as possible. But click that button. That'll give you a form to fill out to submit a comment. You can also email to airpermits@louisvilleky.gov, or you can mail or hand deliver to our offices at 701 West Ormsby, Suite 303, 40203. Again, we're open for another week. If anyone has any difficulties finding that stuff, my direct number is 502-574-6714, but also 574-6000. We don't always have great answers or a thorough enough response, but we do not want to make it difficult to put a comment in, to express your opinion. So if anybody's having trouble, please reach out to us and we'll try to make it a little bit easier.
Not to interrupt anyone from looking at how to make that comment, I do want to put in a shameless plug for the upcoming meeting of the Louisville Metro Air Pollution Control Board. That's our regulatory board. They'll be meeting on January the 19th at 10 a.m. I hope that you'll join us for that meeting either virtually, or if your schedule doesn't allow, we post a video of that meeting, the minutes, and all the materials on our website. So if you have questions about accessing materials to the board or attending those meetings, please also reach out and we'll get you connected there.
Sarah Lynn?
Y'all, everybody put such good information in the chat, but I don't understand how to save it for myself so I can go back to it.
Can one of my Matt Mudd, do you know how to do that? Well,
Hi, Sarah Lynn. This is Michelle King. I've done that very thing a time or two. You can just click your cursor down and drag and highlight it all and copy and paste it into a Word document.
Cool.
That's
Really?
the easiest way I found.
It's not working. I'll work on it and try, but if you go up, start at the bottom, it works. It didn't work starting at the top. Thank you.
There's another hint in the chat. If you click on the chat and hit Control-A, it selects everything.
Duh.
Greg?
Another good one. Thanks, Craig.
I shouldn't admit to this, but I just jot them down by hand. No, I'm not that bad, but I'm not the best with that. So we'll certainly won't have all of those, but I think when we post some of this presentation material, you'll have some of those links available. And hopefully everybody's able to copy all of that now. But again, reach out, email, phone call. If there's some topic and you remember and somebody at APCD can get you that link, we'll do our best to do so. Sarah Lynn?
I have been an environmental activist, believe it or not, since I was 13 years old, and that is longer than I might want to admit. I do have a Medicare card now. And in all of my experience, nobody has done a better job and has shown me that they intend to include the public better than APCD. And I want you to know that I recognize it and appreciate it.
I'll thank you for that. I'll tell you, a lot of folks here do better and help me and, to do that, but I appreciate that comment.
Because I'm a hard grader.
I think our whole staff wants to be informative, but we have a few folks that really do focus on that and help some of us nerdy permit writers out and things like that. And I don't think it fixes all the issues. Sometimes I run the risk that it's more lip service, but folks do like to understand. They do like to participate. They like to be involved. So those should be the easy things, and they're not. But there's some folks who have really put effort in that. So I appreciate those statements. All right, I'm going to hang out for a few more minutes. Certainly, no one has to, or folks got other things to do. I think we can give maybe 5 more minutes if there's any last comments. Byron B., I see your hand up, or is that a relic hand up?
No, that was from before. I'll take it down.
Okay. But you know, we've got a few more minutes, not trying to rush anybody. I think the key takeaways are January 18th, comment period closes. I hope this discussion has been helpful, but we need those official comments as well, so please make those. We'll have some additional information on our website. Reach out to the district if you're having any trouble finding that stuff or successfully making a comment. Again, we provide the company an opportunity to respond to those comments. They get a 10-day window. It's not required. If they do provide those, we'll push those back out to the public and include that with our responses, which we are required and will do. Make a written response to any of those formal comments. Publish that describing any changes to the permit, any final determinations, how we're proceeding. But that'll be, you know, a more formal response. Is that one more from you, Sarah Lynn, or?
I do.
Sure.
Is it slowing you down to submit comments as PDF documents? Is it helpful to submit them as Word documents so you can cut and paste?
I don't think it's too big of a deal. I think we even have some tech. I shouldn't say I think. I'm pretty sure we have technology to convert PDF back to Word. So we want it to be as easy for you to make those, and I think we can handle. If we really get pinched, we'll reach back out and say, hey, if you have this in Word, we love it. But handwritten's fine. Typed on an old-fashioned typewriter, PDF, Word. We'll do our best with all of them. I don't think it made the move, but our old office had a typewriter that occasionally got used. The good old days. All right, I do think we're kind of wrapping up. Really appreciate the turnout. I appreciate everybody's patience. I think we're going to attempt to do more of these. I think they're more helpful than some of our other processes. But you know, don't forget we also do other type, you know, board meetings. We have other kinds of seminars and presentations. So get signed up for our mailing list. Check our website often. I believe we've just fairly recently gone out on Facebook. So really trying to make it easy for folks to know at least the topics and things that are going on, and we'll continue to work to provide that higher level of transparency and information. I'm going to stay till 7:30. My computer says 7:28. I just don't want to cut somebody off, but it might be awkward silence for a minute and a half.
Supper time. People are bailing.
Thank you for hosting this.
Thanks, everybody, for participating.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
If there's anyone on the call that knows how, if someone has unable to mute themselves, if there's a option for calling in. I just got a message about not being able to unmute, so.
I can give out the number real quick.
As Matt, as host, are you able to unmute someone?
I get a like unmute request. Like I think I'm requesting that the person unmute themselves. If any of the co-hosts have this skill.
Yes, we can mute and unmute.
Unmute Arnita for a minute and see if she has any comments to add. And Arnita, if not, please absolutely submit those.
She is unmuted.
Can you hear us, Arnita?
Okay, can you hear me?
There she is, yes.
Okay, I just had one question that I just never could say it, but that's okay. That just made my blood pressure go up a little. What about, we're talking about what APCD can do. We're talking about what Chemours do. I don't know why I can't ever pronounce that. Okay, who sets the direction? It is EPA, is it not?
Unless others have more specific for this greenhouse gas reduction, it is EPA, and EPA also sets a lot of the minimum standards for us. But locally, our Air Pollution Control Board sets those additional requirements that our agency implements and works with. Not sure if that's directly what you're asking, but it's kind of a hybrid of EPA, especially for the bigger ticket items, and then locally the APCD board and staff.
And on this one in particular, it is rather unique in that these greenhouse gases are regulated exclusively by US EPA and not by APCD. This is not part. The rule that they passed to implement the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act is not delegated to any state or local program. So EPA has retained the exclusive authority for implementing that rule.
And I think that I think it would be important that people know that. When I say that, I mean that you actually say EPA this is EPA. I don't want to say responsibility because ultimately they have the ultimate responsibility, but EPA responsibility, APCD responsibility. Added restrictions are possible, and name what they are. Just people were asking about the equipment in itself. How do you know that the equipment works, and just all of this. In other words, how far can you go, and where does EPA stop and you start? It's like with many programs with the state. There are certain things that the state does, and then the next stage down is the responsibility of the local. So I'm just saying, I think that would help, because I think that APCD, you're getting the brunt of everything. Is what I'm saying here. So I think that we need to know exactly what EPA's role is. They started. We know what they did. We read it. We know what they want to do. But then there are some things, just like you said, are EPA's responsibility, and then there are other things that it is. So that's just that's my take. I would like to see that in some form.
Hey, Arnita, this is Rachel, and thank you so much for that comment. This is the public meeting. If you would kindly provide us that in a written form, we would be happy to help in this situation, be sure that folks understand the uniqueness of this particular rule that's being implemented, and APCD's role in permitting the equipment so that Chemours can meet EPA's rule. That would be a tremendously helpful comment for you to submit for us.
Okay, that's what I was going to say.
Thank you.
It just took me all night to say that.
Better late than never.
Well, I'm signing off. Good night, and thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
All righty.
All right. I think we'll wrap that up then. Thanks, everybody. And certainly we'll be hearing more on this topic.
Thank you.